My name is Miss Erica from the St. Catharines Public Library. Welcome to Fairytale Fridays. So today we're going to be talking about the story of Rapunzel. So we're going to read the story of the Princess Rapunzel, and at the end, if you stick around to the end, we're going to experiment with marshmallows and toothpicks and see if we can build Rapunzel's tower. Alright, so let's get started and let's read our fairy tale that's called Rapunzel. Once upon a time there lived a man and his wife who longed for a child. These good people had a little window at the back of their house that overlooked a magnificent garden next door. But the garden was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to a powerful witch who was feared by all. One day the wife stood at the window and looked down at the garden. In one of the vegetable beds she saw the most beautiful lettuce, the kind that's called Rapunzel. It looked so tempting that she longed to eat some. Every day that followed, she looked out her window at the fresh green lettuce, and the more she looked at it, the more she wanted it. "Dear wife, are you ill?" asked the husband. "Oh, husband," she answered, "if I do not get some of that fresh lettuce, I know I shall die." The husband, who loved his wife so dearly, said to himself, "Whatever the cost, I must climb into the witch's garden and fetch some Rapunzel." So at twilight the man climbed into the garden and picked a handful of lettuce, which he brought back to his wife. She made a salad which was so delicious that she craved even more lettuce. And so the next night, at dusk, her husband scaled the wall again. This time, the witch was waiting for him. "How dare you climb into my garden, stealing lettuce like a thief?" she said angrily. "You shall pay for this." "Please, have mercy," cried the man. "My wife longs so much for the lettuce that without it she thought she would die." The witch's anger was softened a little. "If, as you say, you may take as much as you like," she said, "but there's one condition. You must give me the child your wife will soon bring into the world." The poor man was so frightened that he agreed. And no sooner had his wife given birth to a child than the witch appeared to take possession of the tiny girl, whom she named Rapunzel. As she grew, Rapunzel was the most beautiful child under the sun, with wonderful long hair, as fine as spun gold. When she was 12 years old, the witch locked her in a tower in the middle of a great forest. This tower had neither doors nor stairs, but at the top there was one small window. If the witch wanted to get inside the tower, she came and stood underneath the window and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And Rapunzel, when she heard the witch, would unfasten her braids, wound them around a hook, and let the long hair fall out the window to the ground below. The old witch climbed up the braids to the tower window. One day a prince rode through the forest near the tower, and he heard the sound of singing. It was Rapunzel, and she was singing because she was lonely. The sound was so sweet that the prince listened, and he wanted to see who was singing. So he followed the voice to the tower, but he could not find a door, so he rode away. But the prince kept thinking about the lovely song that he heard, and he returned every day to listen. And one day he was standing behind a tree, and he heard the witch come along and her call, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." So Rapunzel let down her braids, and the witch climbed up. "So that's the staircase," the prince said. "Then I too will climb." The following day, at dusk, the prince came to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Immediately the golden hair came down, and the prince climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when the prince appeared, but he was very nice and spoke kindly, and he told her how her singing had touched his heart. And when he asked if she would take him for a husband, she thought, "He is kind and handsome and will love me better than my old godmother." And so she said, "Yes." She thought a moment and said, "I will need a way to escape from this tower, so you must bring some silk with you each time you come to see. I will braid it into a ladder." So every evening the prince came to Rapunzel, and each time he brought some silk. The witch knew nothing of the prince coming, until one day Rapunzel said without thinking, "How is it, godmother, that you feel so much heavier than the prince?" "Oh, you wicked child!" cried the witch. "I thought I had hidden you from the whole world, but you have managed to deceive me." In her fury, the witch seized a pair of scissors and snipped off Rapunzel's beautiful hair. She then took the girl into a lonely desert where she left her. That night the witch returned to the tower, and she fastened Rapunzel's braid on the hook at the window frame of the tower. And when the prince called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let the braids down. The prince climbed up and found not his beloved Rapunzel, but the old witch. The witch cried, "You came for your lady love, but a pretty bird has flown, and its song has been silenced. You will never see Rapunzel again." The prince was filled with grief, and in his despair he jumped from the tower, and he landed in a bush with thorns that poked his eyes so he could not see. He wandered around the forest, living on roots and berries, and lamenting the loss of Rapunzel. For a year the prince wandered, until one day he came to the desert. Suddenly he heard a voice that was singing, and he knew who it was. Rapunzel saw and came closer and recognized him, and she put her arms around his neck and cried. Two of her tears moistened his eyes, and they were magically healed, so he could see her again. Then the prince led Rapunzel to his kingdom, where they were welcomed with joy, and they lived happily ever after for the rest of their years. The end. All right, so why don't you follow me, and we can go try and build our own tower for Rapunzel. So to build Rapunzel's tower, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need marshmallows and some toothpicks or spaghetti and a ruler. So you'll want to take your marshmallows and your toothpicks or spaghetti, and you're going to stick the toothpicks into the marshmallows. So as you can see, you'll want to put the toothpicks into each marshmallow to get a base, and then you can start building your tower and adding more marshmallows and toothpicks. And you will want to try maybe different shapes some squares and maybe some triangles. And see how tall you can get your tower to be. And once you think it's pretty tall, you want to take your ruler and you can measure to see how tall it is. So let's see how big mine is. So mine's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches tall. So why don't you see if you can do this at home and see if you can build a taller tower than mine.